I'm Aviva Rosenstein, the Director of Community Engagement for Camera's Israel office. In today's camera webinar, we invited Alon Penzel, 23-year-old Israeli author of Testimonies Without Boundaries, to speak with us today about the importance of paying homage to the victims of Hamas's abuse and to stamp out the denial of its violence spread by its supporters. To understand how such a young man could have the wherewithal to write and publish a detailed exploration of survivor accounts from October 7th, I'll take a moment to share with you a bit about Alon's background. At age 16, Alon received the prestigious Ramon Award for Excellence in Leadership after publishing his first book, The Way Life Could Be. He served in the military as a spokesperson for the Foreign Press and the Unit of Coordination of Government Activities and Territories, and currently represents the State of Israel in the international arena at global conferences. In the summer of 23, Alon completed his year-long camera fellowship, where he excelled in executing thoughtful educational events for his Haifa University peers and published thoroughly researched articles. When I heard from Alon just days after October 7th, looking for ways to help, I wasn't at all surprised. In the early weeks after the massacre, while many of us here in Israel were afraid to leave our homes and fear of being met by a rocket or even a terrorist, Alon was already traveling to the devastated kibbutzim, collecting testimonies from the victims. He understood immediately the urgent need for the world to hear from Israelis to understand the gravity of what's happened in our country and to our people. And after experiencing the darkest day in Jewish history since the Shoah, we are participating in this webinar to bear witness to the tragedy that befell the Jewish state. Hearing from Alon and helping to get his book, Testimonies Without Boundaries, shared widely as one way we can honor the victims of the October 7th massacre. Alon will speak now for about 25 minutes, and then we'll take questions. If you run your cursor at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A icon. Click there and type your questions while he speaks. We most likely won't be able to get to all of your questions and comments, but please know that we will read and consider everything you write. We want to hear your thoughts, so don't be shy. And with that, it's my privilege to turn this over to Alon Penzel.
Thank you so much, Aviva. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here with me today. I'm moved by that. It means a lot to me. And let me I'll introduce myself right away, but let me start maybe from the end. My book opens up. This is my book, Testimonies Without Boundaries. I'll just show it to you. And it opens up with, as these words are being written, children, women, elderly, and young men are still being held captive in the Gaza Strip. This book is calling for their immediate release, and I think after 300 days of war, it's worth starting with that. Just like Aviva introduced me, my name is Alon Penzel. I live in northern Israel. I'm 23 years old, and my entire life I've been surrounded by diplomacy and Hasbara and Israel, and how to introduce and represent Israel properly around the international community, because I do think it is sometimes misrepresented and in the news and generally worldwide. When I was young, I participated in different leadership organizations, which their purpose was to basically represent Israel in a better way, express the point of view of teenagers in Israel. When I was 16, I wrote a book, the first book in English, about my experiences from a summer camp in the United States with Palestinians, Jordanians, Egyptians, Americans whom I lived with for over a month. And then I got drafted to the military, and I started my military service. I served in the unit for coordination of government activities in the territories, also stands for COGAT. It's basically a unit that is in charge of coordinating civilian affairs in the Palestinian territories, both in Judah and Samaria and the Gaza Strip. And my unit was basically responsible for coordinating life-saving medical treatments for Palestinian patients from the Gaza Strip to Israeli hospitals. It was in charge of coordinating permits for Palestinians to enter Israel, to work or to visit their families or uh, to just travel in Israel. During COVID, my military unit was coordinating joint training for both Israeli and Palestinian doctors, medical teams to know how to handle COVID. We were coordinating a vaccination campaign for Palestinians in Judah and Samaria. Um, uh, and then obviously I got released of the military out of the military and I started studying at the Haifa University. I'm second year uh, studying political science, second year at Haifa University, and then October 7th erupted. And obviously October 7th changed everything to everyone. It was a national tragedy that I do believe felt like a personal one to each one of us. It touched us differently. Um, but we were all affected significantly by the events, by the atrocities, by the horrors, by the massacre that occurred on October 7th. And as a third generation to Holocaust survivor, my grandfather escaped Germany. He was born in Germany and escaped Germany. In 1939, he escaped to China and then to Israel, and died not long after he arrived in Israel from also diseases and bad medical condition that he was suffering out of what he was going through during the Holocaust, both in Germany and in China. Um, and when October 7th erupted, I realized that I needed to do something, to come up with some kind of an initiative to commemorate the atrocities. I already saw, just like the Holocaust has been denied ever since it happened, and unfortunately it's still being denied worldwide by many people, even in friendly countries, even in some of Israel's most friendly countries, it is denied. I already assumed and expected and predicted how October 7th would be denied and the atrocities would be denied, and Israel would be blamed for the massacre it itself experienced. And I realized I needed to commemorate the testimonies and the stories of the victims, of those who are unfortunately no longer with us, of those who survived, um, of the families who want their beloved ones to be remembered and that want the stories and the last moments of the dear ones to be commemorated for generations to come. I decided to start writing a book that covers the testimonies of October 7th, the atrocities of October 7th in a completely uncensored way, in a way that would share exactly what happened in all aspects of October 7th, if it's the kibbutzim, the moshavim, the deadly party, the deadly roads, if we're talking about children, about babies, toddlers, infants, elderly, women, pregnant women, if we're talking about sexual abuse, basically to cover everything that happened on October 7th. And then I started. I just began. I was trying to collect testimonies from both Zaka volunteers, from Israel's Medical Forensic Institute, from Nova survivors, those who survived the Nova festivals, and some of them lost their relatives, their closest friends. It was right after October 7th, and obviously it was very challenging to get people to talk to me about what they saw, about what they experienced, about who they lost. And my basically my mission, my assignment, my duty, as I felt it, was to get them to talk about the most sensitive, specified, elaborated details of what happened to them, in order for those details again to be commemorated for generations to come. At the beginning, I was trying to get to talk with, for instance, Zaka volunteers, and they were giving me the testimonies either physically or by Zoom or Google Meet. We have to understand it was right after October 7th. Everyone was busy. I was obviously documenting everything by camera and by audio. And the first challenge after bringing them and convincing them to talk to me was to basically persuade them to share with me the again most detailed, elaborated, specific details of what they saw. When someone comes and talks to you and tells you about the atrocities and the horrors he saw in the kibbutzim, in Be'eri, in Kfar Aza, in Nachal Oz, he doesn't tell you exactly what he saw. He doesn't tell you the specific condition of a specific body. He does tell you that he saw terrible things, but he doesn't tell you the specifics. And the biggest challenge for me at the very beginning, was to get him to talk also about those specific details. As I knew, we're dealing with the international community and a community that is trying to refute and contradict everything that comes out of Israeli mouths. And I needed the exact, very credible, reliable, precise details of what happened. And in order to do that, I have to admit, many times during my book, I also wrote it during my book and described my interaction with those giving me the testimonies. I felt like I was asking insensitive questions because I needed to get to the bottom of this. I needed to understand exactly what happened. And if it was talking to Nova survivors and they told me how they saw their friend dying next to them, and in the most unfortunate, insensitive way, I had to stop them and ask before they continue to the next step of the running. I had to stop and ask them, and how did he look like? How did he die? What happened to him? How was he slaughtered? How was he murdered? I want to know exactly. We need to know exactly. It's not just out of curiosity. We need the international community to know. They will deny it. They will refute the massacre. They will claim it was Israel that premeditated everything. We need to know exactly what happened. And the entire time, during my collection of the testimonies, it's been very challenging to get the testimonies and also listen to them. I do want to share with you a bit about my mental experience listening to those testimonies. I'm 23 years old and I've heard and seen things that I never imagined I would. I knew it would be like that or similar to what I imagined at the beginning when I came up with the initiative, but I never imagined it to be so horrible and horrific. And the optics and the visuals are visuals that are still with me in my heart and in my brain. I can still see them. Not to talk about those who saw the atrocities in real life and how they introduced and described them to me, and how they're still dealing with the tragedy. So it's been a very complicated mental process. I can tell you about one of the moments that I almost decided to stop writing the book for a period, maybe take a break. It was one of the testimonies that was given to me by a Zaka volunteer about one of the children in one of the kibbutzim. You can definitely read about it in the book. I'm going to say a little bit about the testimonies, but it is definitely more elaborated in the book. It is about a young child. I can't say exactly how old he was at the time. They can't say how old he was at the time because at the time the body wasn't identified. The condition of the body was very severe and it hadn't yet been identified by the Israel's Medical Forensic Institute to determine who the person was, but we do know it was a little child. And in this specific situation that touched me deeply, it was a very unusual incident where the child who was found dead didn't have any gunshots on his body. He was, though, both beheaded and his hands were cut off. It is impossible to know what happened first. whether he was beheaded or his hands were cut off, but we do know he was tortured while he was alive. And again, I want to elaborate further about what happened in this specific incident and in over other 60 testimonies that are described in the book. But this is one of the stories, one of many stories of children, of elderly, of women, of entire families who were butchered, who were slaughtered, which were basically going through hell during their last moments, and no one was there to save them. Sometimes when I speak about the emotional process that I just described, it's not just the visuals that I saw. For instance, in the Israel's Medical Forensic Institute, there is an entire chapter where I shared the visuals that I saw of the bodies that were unidentified, of how severe their condition was. But that's not just that. That's about imagining the last moments of those people that I'm writing about in the book, trying to imagine how the interaction between them and their other family members, how it went, between a family of whom family members were completely tortured and butchered after being tortured, just to imagine the last moments of those four family members. That's not easy. But the entire time, I knew that it would be super important to again commemorate the atrocities for generations to come, not only for the Jewish people to remember how important it is that we have a sovereign country to protect ourselves at all times, and how unnegotiable our legitimacy to our sovereignty is, but also for the international community to not be able to deny what happened. And after I collected the testimonies, over 60 testimonies, and finished writing the book, I had a very clear target from the very beginning to distribute the book worldwide to as many people as possible, to the biggest institutions such as the UN, such as the EU, the White House, to world leaders, to the President of the United States. The entire time I've wanted to get to the most important people in the world to make sure they know what happened on October 7th, because the testimonies in the book, and I didn't mention it, I should, some of them, perhaps half or maybe the majority of them, are exclusive testimonies that have not yet been exposed, that even the Israeli public itself may not be exposed to the atrocities that occurred, of some of them at least, that are described in them. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knows about it, especially the most powerful people in the world. And so I got in touch with Israelis, which is a Hasbara organization that does a great job to basically represent Israel all over the world, and got in cooperation with them. I sent the books to the Ministry of Diaspora and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I wanted those ministries, those formal Israeli institutions, to distribute the books worldwide. And at the beginning, they wanted to read the book. They wanted to send it to as many relevant parties and organizations and individuals to read the book, to make sure that all testimonies have been carefully verified. My purpose was for those ministries to publish the book and distribute it on behalf of Israel. It has to be carefully verified. And after a long verification process, after the sent it to so many people, after organizations and projects that were assigned on behalf of Israel to investigate the crimes committed on October 7th, approved the testimonies, I'm very glad to say that both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Diaspora purchased thousands of copies and are currently in formal cooperation with me to distribute the book worldwide. And we intend to go to different delegations all over the world to distribute the book and share the testimonies with diplomats, foreign diplomats, with ambassadors, with the press, with the public. And obviously we have a huge mission ahead of us. This is only the beginning. The book was initially written in Hebrew and was translated to English. It is now currently being translated to Italian and Spanish. We're trying to get it translated to more languages. Absolutely, there is no doubt it needs to be translated to as many languages as possible to get to as many people as possible. And in order to do that, obviously, so far, I've obviously been criticized by so many people overseas for incredibility, criticizing perhaps my credibility, criticizing the fact that such a work should be done by a governmental office and not by a young individual. Criticized because people like to criticize Israeli work and Israeli credibility and the testimonies of Israelis. But I do not intend to give up. I think we have a super important mission here, super important assignment. We need to make sure that the testimonies are heard. We owe it to our people, we owe it to our victims, we owe it to our survivors. And there are people telling me, people who support Israel telling me this is a challenging book to read, this is too difficult for me to read. And I always say, I know, it is. But what would the people who went through the atrocities say? People also criticize me for being insensitive to the families who lost their beloved ones. And in the book, obviously, I describe, not by the name of the families, but by the name of those giving me the testimonies, incidents of families which got burnt and tortured and abused and sexually abused. Men and women, by the way, this is one of a kind book, also because it shows sexual abuse not only of women, but for the first time also of men. And I have been criticized for being insensitive towards those families, sharing, the stories of their family members who got slaughtered, sharing their last moments. And every time I'm criticized in that point, I say that they're completely right. And yet, when in the balance, when putting it in the balance, I do think that commemorating those atrocities, those testimonies, is important for the future for our generations to come, for our future, for the future of this country, for the legitimacy of this country, for the legitimacy of Israel to have conducted this war so far and to continue with the war, if that's what's chosen, to the legitimacy to bring our people back. Such a simple request, simple as that, just bring our people back. And obviously I've also received many comments telling me that the book is also very important and significant. Comments from families who lost their beloved ones because they want their beloved ones' stories to be commemorated. They want their stories to be remembered for generations to come. And with all that, with on one hand the criticism I receive, and on the other hand the reviews I receive of how important and significant the book is, I can tell you that personally, deep inside, there is no project for me that could be more significant than this specific initiative. As this is not a personal initiative for me, this is a national one. I always say that I have kind of sacrificed my mental soul during the last almost 10 months in order to write the book, in order to make sure that the testimonies are her testimonies that otherwise wouldn't have been written, wouldn't have been known, maybe never would have been heard. I know how important it is to me, and I know how much I'm willing to sacrifice in order to make sure that they are heard, and I won't give up until it happens. I also do want to say that, as I already mentioned, we have a lot of work ahead of us. And I'm looking forward to keep cooperating with people worldwide, with the Jewish communities and the non-Jewish communities, with pro-Israeli organizations and individuals, and just, you don't have to be a pro-Israel. You know what? You don't have to be pro-Israel. You just have to be a rational human being to support the existence and the significance of such a book. Every human being around the world should should support the documentation of horrible events such as October 7th, just like each one of us, I believe, that is currently on the webinar wants and identifies with the sacrifices of the victims in the genocide of Rwanda in the past, or Sudan, or Myanmar. We all understand how awful it was, although we have never been there, although it's not in our location, although perhaps we know nothing about those locations. But we know how awful it is. But for some reason, when it comes to Israel, when it gets to Israel, it's not so obvious that when Israel is going through a massacre, that it should be condemned. At the beginning it was, and there was international support of Israel. It was the first days. And then quickly later, 10 months later, we already see that we're being condemned by most of the world's countries. And that's very unfortunate. And we have a lot of work to do ahead of us, in order to make sure to fix it, in order to make sure to improve it. And I keep hearing people who say no one would listen to you, it doesn't matter. People always hate Israel. People would always hate Israel. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what the circumstances are. And I believe we have the duty to try. And this is what I intend to do. So before I hand it over to Aviva and to QAA, just I would like to mention again, this is, and I'll show it to you again, this is just important for me to show you Testimonies Without Boundaries. This is basically a national book. And in order to make sure that everyone in the world knows about it, we need to make sure that everyone purchases it, distributes it, shares it with their friends and families. This is their duty. We have a collective mission here as a people. And now I'll hand it over to Q&A. I see that you have a lot of questions down there. So Aviva, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Alon. Thank you so much for sharing your powerful story. It wasn't easy to listen to, but it was so important to hear. Denying what occurred on October 7th has been a consistent weapon used against Israel, even extreme cases where it's been suggested that Israel used AI to fabricate the massacre. Though we know in many cases challenging of what happened isn't coming from a genuine case of concern, for you to publish this book, you still had to make sure that what you're reporting was as accurate as possible. So were you able to verify all of the testimonies that you received? And if so, how did you go about doing it?
So obviously it was super important to verify all the testimonies in order to make sure that the book is credible and it can be distributed worldwide without any doubt. And I'm glad to say that it has been carefully verified by both Israel's ministries of diaspora and foreign affairs, by the police, by Love 433. I obviously made sure to try and get the testimonies from as many people. For instance, if I have one testimony, to make sure that I get it from more than one person, obviously. When I see visuals from the events, from the testimony that I received, not only to see the incident that I describe in the book, but also to see the person giving me the testimony in the video or photo from that incident. And I have to be honest with you, there was a specific incident which I couldn't verify completely, and that's why I didn't put in the book. Between me and you and everyone who's here, I do believe those incidents happened as well. But since I was unable to verify them completely, 100%, I felt the responsibility not to put them in the book, because it's better to be safe than sorry in this case, especially when we know that we are checked from all directions, especially when it comes to Israel. So I'm very confident with what's in the book. And again, I'll mention that there are testimonies that have not yet been heard, exclusive ones, and they've also been verified. And verifying testimonies that have not been heard before is even more complicated and challenging. I won't deny it. But when you go through you work with organizations and projects which are assigned on behalf of the state of Israel to investigate the crimes committed. For instance, when it came to sexual assault, the sexual assault is perhaps the most controversial issue, that is always denied by the international community because it's very hard to reach evidence of sexual abuse. And I described sexual abuse of both men and women in the. So how can I be sure that it actually happened? So I was in touch and with several conversations with an organization that was assigned on behalf of Israel to investigate sexual assault that occurred in October 7th. And only once they verified my testimonies, then I could eventually approve them and put them in the book. So as you can see, the procedure of writing the book wasn't only about collecting the testimonies and drafting it and sharing my feelings and sharing my interaction with those giving me the testimonies, but also the verification process, which was very important.
Thank you, Alon. Would you feel comfortable sharing with us one of the exclusive testimonies that's in the book?
There's so many, and I would share one or two, definitely. I would say that this is hard to listen, so this is kind of a trigger warning for those who feel that might be a little complicated and difficult to hear. It is challenging, but that's our reality. So we do have the obligation to listen to it and face what happened. One of the testimonies that I heard about was also in the kibbutzim. It was about a man who was at home with his entire family. There were 4 family members at home. And when the volunteers of Zaka came to search the house after the massacre, they found 3 of them, the mother and the 2 children, in one room, completely tied up, shot, dead completely. And the father wasn't in that room. And when they were looking for the father, they assumed there would be a male character in the house. They did find him in another room. He was in the safe room, actually. And he was also tied up. He was completely naked, and he had a metal object inserted to his groin. There was another incident in which Zaka volunteers, and it is also described precisely in the book, found a man who was basically, this is in a different house, crucified to a door, not the front door of the house. He was basically crucified to the door. He was completely dead. He was shot as well. And you could see huge nails inserted into his body. Another testimony, and maybe the last one, because I know it is challenging to hear, is about a couple, a man and a woman, who were found in one of the kibbutzim. They were both tied up to a mattress. There were metal wires inserted to their stomachs. They were basically tied up to their bed, to the mattress, by metal wires that were inserted to their bodies. And they were obviously both dead. We don't know if they died from losing blood. We don't know if they died because they were also shot. We don't know what happened to them before they died or after they died, because they were also found, both of them, completely naked. And this is, again, a couple of testimonies from so many that are described in the book. I have not elaborated here about more testimonies of children, of women, of elderly, of families that were tortured. Each one of the family members was tortured differently. Of young people from the Nova Festival who saw their friends basically saw their friends' mind, their friends' brains, skulls blowing up in front of them. Those who got themselves hit by RPGs. So many testimonies, and as I'm saying again, you might have heard some of what I've described, you might have not. There are more exclusive ones that, as hard as they are to listen to, and I always say that this book is probably one of the hardest ones to read in the history, maybe. This is why it also makes it one of the most important and significant ones. And I know it's hard to listen, and although I've been through it for the last 10 months and writing it and repeating it in lectures and public speaking events, I speak about those testimonies over and over again. And every time I share a different testimony that just comes to my mind very naturally and very spontaneously. You ask me a question, I didn't think of what testimony to share. It just came to my mind. There are so many. And it's still hard for me, although I've been through it so many times. I'm not immune, believe me, I'm not. But as hard as it is, I'm saying again, this is why it also makes it super important.
Staying on the topic of denial, much of it has come from the universities, professors, administrators, and students alike. And as a current university student, how do you wrap your head around how other students are rebuffing these testimonies that you heard firsthand, that you saw with your own eyes? And what advice do you give to your fellow camera fellows and student activists who are prepping for another year of confronting and challenging their anti-Israel peers?
So first of all, I would say that I do believe I have a small advantage, which is my age. It helps me connect to young people more easily. The fact that I'm not obligated to any organization or any formal institution. I I started writing the book, and I still am doing the initiative as a personal initiative of mine, as a personal project. It obviously raises my credibility. People know I'm doing it because I care. By the way, I'll mention it. All the incomes from the book go to its translation to more languages. Um, Money has never been the purpose. CV has never been the purpose. Reputation has never been the purpose. Has never been the goal. Commemoration has Israel's legitimacy has been the purpose the entire time. And the fact that a 23-year-old man does it, who's not obligated to any organization or institution, but just does it because he cares, raises my credibility especially in front of young people. That's why I think it's also very important to go out for me to go out and speak to in campuses and universities, etc. I would say that on the other hand, I would say that it is also more challenging when it gets to campuses in young adults, as you're describing, in universities in the United States, in the UK, in Australia and Canada, perhaps also in Israel in some cases. It is more challenging because I feel from my personal experience so far, and I hope it will change, that they they do. I'll say it is as simple as that. The young people buy what the media feeds them, um, and that's very unfortunate. And once they're fed with that information, it is very hard to change your perspective. And also, once it becomes trendy for young people to go and protest against Israel, although you go out and you ask them where is Israel and they don't know, it becomes very trendy. So it's very easy for them to go out and join the protests and join anti-Zionism protests, demonstration, and anti-Semitism act, um, anti-Semitism acts. In it is challenging. It is more challenging when it gets to young people in that way. Um, But the fact that it is more challenging doesn't mean it can't be that they can't be impacted, they can't be influenced. I can tell you honestly that I have received many reviews, many comments from young individuals worldwide who have not only given them a new perspectives once they read the book and heard me speaking. You know, it doesn't actually matter. Sometimes people read the book and get the testimonies, or listen to me and get the testimonies. Both are important. And and they told me how their perspective changed. And on the other hand, young people who support Israel told me, you're giving us the motivation and the determination, as you're asking about camera fellows and other young individuals worldwide. You're telling me you're giving us the determination and motivation to not give up, um, to anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist comments, and keep fighting for legitimacy and duty to defend Israel. Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself; it has the duty to defend itself. I always keep saying it. It's not just about our choice whether to defend our people or not. We have the duty to do so. We have the duty to bring our people back. And on one hand, I do feel like I'm getting to young people's minds and try to change their perspectives and manage to do so. And on the other hand, when it gets to pro-Israeli activists, for instance, they are telling me that the book, the testimonies themselves, the information in the book, and generally the motivation and the determination they feel from me gives them some more energy to keep fighting for Israel's legitimacy.
Thank you, Alon. As you've described, your book is very raw, and you said that you didn't want to censor any of the details. And you wrote the testimonials exactly as how it was shared with you. So a few people listening here have asked, what did the survivors of October 7th or the family members of those who were murdered or taken hostage think of your book? Do you know if any of them have read it? I know you said you received a few positive comments and feedback. We're just curious to kind of hear if they're able to handle, this book being out there and such detailed descriptions of what occurred to their family.
So that's not easy, and I do hear some reviews from some comments from them, even from those giving me the testimonies. There are about 60 testimonies from about 20 people, and those people gave me their testimonies by full name. And for them, being so now the world knows what they experienced and what they went through. The wound is basically open to everyone. They haven't yet figured out how to overcome the tragedy they went through, and now they're facing comments perhaps they receive from their communities once they read the books about what they went through. First, I would like to say that those giving me the testimonies, perhaps some of them are here, they are very courageous people. They are the bravest people I've met. They realize its importance and decided to share the worst that they have seen because they realize the significance of the book. And even though they gave me the testimonies themselves, once they read it, it sometimes becomes even more difficult for them. And on the other hand, during my time collecting the testimonies, also during after the book was published and people read it and talked to me, they told me that they feel like it's kind of their therapy to talk about what they went through, to read someone who writes about what they went through. And in some way, I kind of identify with them, that what we're doing now, and when I go out and speak in public speaking events or lectures, or when I speak to ambassadors, to diplomats, to journalists, it's kind of my therapy as well to talk about what I've seen and witnessed. So they are telling me sometimes it's their therapy. And regarding the families, also families of hostages and families of those who lost their beloved ones, I have received comments telling me, thank you for the initiative. Thank you for making sure that the world knows what happened to our dearest. Because otherwise, again, I'm saying perhaps those stories would have never been discovered, because in order to find them, I will mention again, I had to go deep inside into the souls of those people to ask them the most insensitive and most difficult questions, to ask them for specific details of what happened, of the horrors. And I'm glad, kind of satisfied, that the families of the victims, which I, to be honest, from the very beginning have done it first of all for them, are appreciative of the initiative and realize its importance. And as I said, there is also criticisms from some families or some people who feel like we should come over what happened. We should not keep commemorating the awful things that happened to us. I do receive it. I completely respect it. Sometimes I agree with it. And yet, when I put it on the balance, I realize that we have to remember what happened. This is the worst tragedy that happened to us in the history of this country. The worst tragedy that happened since the establishment of this country, since the Holocaust. Um, and we have the duty to commemorate it, although I'm aware of the fact, and we all know that it may hurt some people's feelings. I'm aware of that. I apologize for that. I'm trying to be as sensitive as I can. Um, but that's the situation. I hope that also when families and peoples of the victims are listening to me right now, they realize that I'm doing this first and foremost for them in order to make sure that the dearest ones and their stories are remembered and are commemorated and are not forgotten, and that no one would, for God's sake, blame Israel for killing their beloved ones. There are people saying Israel was uh, planning this entire massacre from the very first place. So I realize how important it is, especially when it comes to Israel, because the international community likes to criticize us and refute what we say and 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 make allegations and accusations against us. So in the balance, when I put it in the balance, there is no choice but to be sometimes less sensitive in order to commemorate what happened.
You really are inspiration, Alon. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for, on behalf of everyone here. Thank you so much. Your book was first published in Hebrew, as you said, and now it's in English, and you're planning to get it published in Spanish, and I think you said Italian. What other languages are you aiming to translate it to? Arabic, I feel like seems like an obvious next important choice. And have you experienced any difficulties in getting it distributed once it's been translated?
So I definitely plan on translating it to Arabic, to Chinese, to Spanish, to Italian, to French, to many other languages. It's important that as many people as possible um, um, know what happened. And yes, I have faced some challenges at the beginning when I tried to publish the book in English. It's already on Amazon in English, but at the beginning when I tried to publish it on Amazon, I can tell you that Amazon blocked the book, um, arguing that the book violates the guidelines of the company. Approximately 2 weeks later, they changed the course of their decision. They reversed their decision and approved the book. Now it's completely on Amazon, on all its international online websites, in paperback, ebook, hardcover, and soon as an audiobook. And I'm very happy that we managed to change the decision of Amazon. I don't know. I can't tell you for sure why it happened. I can't tell you for sure um, what what the motive and the incentive behind their decision was. I don't know. I do know what they told me, but I'm very glad that it changed right now. This was the first challenge, and I can assure you that there will be many more in the future. It's way easier to give the stage um, to a Palestinian who writes a book about the Palestinian agenda than giving the stage to an Israeli who writes a book about something that everyone should be, that there should be a complete consensus about the massacre that we went through. And yet it is way harder to get the stage. And I hope that I don't hope, I know that I will be able to face and overcome those future challenges that will definitely appear.
Alon, you've said it and I've said it. It's you're only 23 years old. It's this would be heavy, difficult for any older person of anyone of any age, and to have voluntarily taking on so much grief for the sake of Israel and the Jewish people. It's there's no words to express our gratitude to you and for your goal and supporting and helping the victims. of the Hamas massacre, of the hostages that are still inside Gaza, 300 days on and counting. At this time we just have time for one more question. So I think this is a good one to end on that a few people have asked. After hearing you speak, it's clear that you've put a lot on the line to help the voices of victims be shared and not be forgotten. So now, what can we do on our end to help you widely distribute your book?
Thank you for what you've said, and I do believe that that this is that I've done it for a way greater cause than myself. This is why I'm here today. This is why I've done everything. The book is now translated to English. It will be soon translated to more languages, but currently it's in Hebrew and English. And we need to get it distributed to as many people as possible. We need to purchase the book on Amazon. We need to send the link, the Amazon link, to as many people as possible, to as many family members, to as many organizations as possible. We're currently looking for funds to keep translating the book to more languages. We're looking for funds for me to go abroad and give public speaking events completely for free, just so people can know what happened here, to share their testimonies. We need you to purchase the book. We need you to distribute it, to share the link with your friends, the Amazon link. You can find the UK Amazon link, the American Amazon link, the Canadian Amazon link everywhere. Share it with your friends. Comment. Give positive reviews. Rate it. Pro-Palestinian just enter the book and rate it 1 star just because they wanna, they don't want it to appear on a high place on Amazon. No, we're fighting for our legitimacy, and we need you for that. I won't be able to do it without you. Absolutely not. I need you. I need our people. I need every rational human being who's listening to me right now to realize how important this book is, to be distributed, to get to the most important people. And by the way, I'm available to everyone on social media. If you have any suggestions, any ideas of how to promote the book in more languages, in more places, in more institutions, in more public speaking events, please get in touch with me. Purchase the book, send it to your friends. That's important. We have a national mission here, and I'm very grateful to be here today. That's very important. And thank you for everyone who's listened to me so far. Yeah.
Thank you, Alon. Unfortunately, our time is up, although I think we could have spoken to you for another hour. But my apologies to those questions that we couldn't get to today. And thank you again, Alon, for joining us today and sharing with us your story and your process and publishing such an important book. Again, as Alon said, I also want to recommend everyone to purchase Alon Penzel's book, Testimonies Without Boundaries, which you can find via Amazon. And right after the end of this meeting, of this webinar, we'll be sending out a mailing, which thanking you for attending, and also the links to Amazon so that you can purchase the book.
This is the book. You can see it now.
Thanks, Alon. I also want to say that if you like what you heard today, or if you'd like to help Camera continue to reach and support extraordinary young adults like Alon, and help us strengthen the next generation of proud Zionists through our campus department and our Education Institute, I hope that you'll consider making a donation to our organization. Just go to camera.org. You'll see a big red button there where you can make a gift, which we very much appreciate. Thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. I wish you a good day, and that concludes our program.